Let's think about a kind of aerobic athlete. Let's think about a triathlete. Let's think about an open water swimmer. Let's think about a distance runner. Let's think about a games player, distance runner. All of these performers, I think it's fair to say, we could assume are kind of aerobically driven. Therefore, as a result of that, they experience certain respiratory adaptations when they train effectively over a period of time, and I want to spend some time addressing what those are. So the first one I want to get into here is that the athlete who is engaging in effective aerobic training, the effects on the respiratory system are going to include the following. They are going to get a decreased F. That means a decreased breathing frequency at rest. Okay, they're going to breathe fewer times per minute at rest. Now that seems a bit counterintuitive. Less breathing, why? Well, because of course their tidal volume is greater. As a result of that, we can also take that a little bit further. We can say because resting tidal volume, how much air is breathed per breath, has gone up. So to maintain minute ventilation, that's the relationship that we have. Well, how has that happened? Why has that occurred? And we know that that's occurred because we now have stronger respiratory muscles. So think about diaphragm, think about internal intercostals, think about well, just those two actually in this particular case at rest, because they've got stronger respiratory muscles for that reason. The resting tidal volume has gone up. Now what this all means, once we go into exercise conditions, this becomes even more beneficial. Why? That is because we have got a greater frequency range. So if our breathing frequency, how many times we breathe per minute at rest, is lower, and we've got a sort of maximum breathing frequency, haven't we, when we're going for it, well, in that case, the range between the two is greater. Now, what that leads to is the following. We have, if I could say so, what this leads to is that we have a greater maximal breathing frequency, and especially the difference between rest and non. And that again is because of the strength of those respiratory muscles, and especially the expiratory muscles, the breathing out muscles. Think about the rectus abdominis, think about the internal intercostals. These become more and more efficient, therefore we can breathe out faster during maximal exercise conditions. Now what this means as a result, folks, is that we can experience over here, our minute ventilation as a result of all this is we get a greater maximal minute ventilation. So we can breathe more air per minute in essence. And that's because we've got a greater maximal frequency and we've got a greater tidal volume as well. Therefore, our minute ventilation goes up. But that's also and one of the reasons that happens is because we get a reduced down arrow IRV. Now let me explain what this is. IRV is the inspiratory reserve volume. And what that essentially means is that once we are trained and we're sort of aerobically fitter, because our tidal volume has gone up, the sort of reserve in the lung is less. The inspiratory breathing in reserve is less. As a result of that, of course, tidal volume goes up. Now meanwhile, exactly could be said about the expiratory reserve volume also decreases. The expiratory, I won't put reserve volume again, but the amount of air that we can breathe out if we really push becomes greater. We use it up because we've got that more powerful muscle and that expiratory muscle. As a result of all this, again, our maximum minute ventilation is greater. And my final point for today is the following. That was meant to be a different colour. My final point today is the following, and a really important point as well. Because we have got stronger respiratory muscles, our residual volume, this is the amount of air which is always left in the lungs to prevent damage to the alveoli, our residual volume goes down slightly. Now we still need to maintain that, but we're able to push out more air as a result. Okay, so those are the respiratory adaptations. Now that's not the whole story, because the breathing system, the respiratory system, doesn't exist by itself. We also have to remember other associated adaptations. Remember the following. There's also capillarization, more capillaries at the alveolus. or collectively the alveoli. Therefore, we get more exchange, we get greater rate of diffusion. In fact, we therefore get an increased diffusion rate. Now, technically, this is this is a vascular consideration. We get an increase in diffusion rate. We get more oxygen into the blood, more CO2 out of the blood. And also, because our respiratory muscles are stronger, we get an increased access to deeper alveoli. So the alveoli that sit at the most sort of distal part from the bronchioles, they can be reached more efficiently, and that is also a respiratory adaptation. So just remember those additional points, otherwise those are our respiratory adaptations. Cheers.